Can you guys hear me really well?
Yes.
Okay, good. So
Yes.
the time is 6 o'clock. Hopefully, we get a couple more people in. Please do your AAP5s as you guys are streaming in. This just helps us to keep and record where our services are getting to, what part of the reservations we're getting to. Are you guys excited for chapter 3?
Yes.
Awesome. So, did you guys get a chance to kind of read through chapter 3 yet? It's all about planting your garden. It's about, now that we've planned everything out, now that we understand what our soil looks like and what we need to do for our soil, we're gonna start planting our garden. So that's what we're doing now. And next week, when we're going into chapter 4, we'll be talking about maintaining your garden and keeping it watered throughout the summer and then helping it grow, maintaining and looking for pests and stuff. And then those of you, I see 4 of you guys that have been here for the last 3 classes, and these 3 classes, now you guys can get the hard copy of the manual, and it's a really pretty manual if you guys can come to the Navajo Nation Library and pick it up. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Anna Rita Yanishya. You guys can call me Anna. Twahana Nishla, Twatsani Bashichin, Twachini Dashichi Aro, Tashe Dashanala, Niji Hasana Ada Ani Nashado, Arizona Health Zone, Banashnish. I am with the University of Arizona's Cooperative Extension Program, and I am based out of the Window Rock office. My office is on the Navajo Nation Fairgrounds here in Window Rock. And if you come through the fairgrounds, we do have a community garden sitting right here in front of our old office. It's kind of like right north of the barbecue pits. And so you can come and see what we're growing. Come 4th of July next year, if you guys are coming around the fair, come and check us out. We usually have some projects going on for the children. This was our first year with the fair here with Arizona Health Zone. A little bit about Seed to Supper. Seed to Supper was put together by the by Oregon State University, but all of these lessons, they are specific to our region. And then Arizona Health Zone just brings this curriculum to you guys. We teach you how to use it, how to plant from beginning to end. And as you go through the course book, you'll start to notice that a lot of the vegetables here that we haven't really been seeing growing here on the reservation for quite some time. But I'm very passionate about growing our own food just because, well, we are a food desert and food costs for us here on the Navajo Nation are high. And we do have higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and other food related diseases. And gardening is just a really good, healthy lifestyle to integrate into your family, your homes. It is the traditional classroom of the Navajo people. That's where our language starts from. That's where our culture really starts from. And so I really believe in the healing power of food, and that food brings people and families together. So I try to spread that message wherever I go. All right, some people that we need to go ahead and introduce today. My trusty sidekick. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Alma Yazi. I work for the Navajo Nation Library, and I'm just here to assist Anna right now. But when you come in for your books, just come and see me. I'm the one that will probably hand them out to you.
So that's Alma. And then joining us remotely as my tech assist, we have Rhonda Little, who is with Arizona Health Zone, Navajo County. Rhonda, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Like Anna Rita said, I'm her colleague. I am Navajo County. I'm based out of the Holbrook office here. And so I'm here to support Anna this week and be in charge of the slides. So thank you all for joining.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go ahead and start the class. Rhonda, can we go ahead and go to slide 2? Okay, so today's topic is going to be planting your garden. We're in our first chapter, we talked about planting in containers and picking out your containers. And we're going to be talking about using your seeds or transplants. You're going to start to notice that in the first chapter, we talked about our growing periods and our first frost dates and making sure that we're growing at the right time throughout our growing calendar. So we're looking forward to anticipate our starts. And then we're going to start thinking about what we want to do as far as how we want to plant, if we're going to be direct seeding, or if we're going to be starting them inside our houses under a nice warm light so that they get a head start before they get transplanted into the garden. So lots of nice things to learn today. Next slide, please. Did we have any questions about placement before we move on, about talking with your before we start talking about gardening with containers? Does anybody have any questions? We know that our containers need to be in full sunlight. They need to be able to drain well so that they're not sitting on the ground and rotting roots, right? Any questions about containers before we go forward, or container selection?
No, but I got a concern. I'm driving right now, so I might be in and out, if that's okay.
Okay. Okay, well, you can always call in, Malcolm, and we will have the session recorded, so we can email the recording to you so that you can review if you miss anything. And we will be having a winter seed to supper class, so if you guys want to sign back up for a second class or recommend it to somebody else, we'll be doing this again in the winter time. All right, moving forward.
We also have a list.
Say what?
Yeah, also have a list for the people who can get the hardcover books.
Yeah, you made the list. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I'll be listening, so if I go in and out.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Malcolm. All right, so next slide, please. So you can use almost anything that you can put a hole in the bottom. So as long as you can create drainage, you can use just about anything. There's good containers and there's bad containers. And some containers are known or suspected to leach dangerous chemicals into the soil. So it's best to avoid like tires, anything that's been painted. We've got things that have been painted with like lead paint. So anything that's got paint on it, your railroad ties, those have chemicals on them. You don't want to use those. Buckets that contained oil or gas or anything like that, you don't want to use. Those are all bad containers. You kind of have to think in the sense that, you know, how our elders are using water barrels out here. And they had like windshield washer fluid in it. We don't want to use those kinds of materials for our plants, and we definitely don't want to use those for drinking water either. So those chemicals can leach into your plants. So be very careful about what you want to use. But in general, bigger containers, they will need to be watered less frequently, but they'll require more soil to fill them. So that's where you have to start thinking about your costs. The soil does cost a lot, especially in containers, because we know that we need to use potting soil in these containers. Using garden soil to refresh throughout the year helps with that and helps with the compaction. Also, we learned last week that the garden containers, container gardening, we do have to add nutrients back into the soil throughout the year, like almost every 2 weeks or every month. Okay. Next slide, please. Can everybody hear me well? Okay.
Yes. I have a question. Well, we need drainage for a flower bed for, for a bed.
Yes, you're definitely going to need drainage for a bed, any kind of bed. Everything needs drainage. You don't want to hold that water inside your containers or your raised beds, because then you create the opportunity for your roots to mold and rot. If they're not draining well, they do need something to drain. Okay, with container gardening, the size does not really matter depending on what you want to grow. As you can see, there's a mescaline mix in this turkey basting pan. This is an experiment that I'm doing with the youth children. So they'll be able to do young greens this winter, because lettuces, they are kind of good to have during the winter, and they do have a short growing period. So they'll be able to have salad before the end of November. But intensive gardening can be done in beds or in containers, depending on what you want to do. You can also do like bean sprouts in jars. It's really easy to do. So size doesn't really matter. What you need to take into account is your roots, your root space, and how big your plant is going to be. Next slide. So when you're preparing your containers, you want to create holes in the bottom. You want at least one hole every 2 square inches or along the sides. Always you need drainage for that water to get out. If you get like a pickle container, they have 5-gallon pickle containers, the 5-gallon buckets, make sure you're washing those out really good. And make sure that you use the hydrogen peroxide. What you want to avoid is trying to get those molds and those spores into your soil and leaching into your soil. So be careful. And then avoid adding gravel to the bottom. You can use sticks, you can use hay, you can use straw, you know what I mean, to cover up that bottom, but gravel is not good. So I'll show you in a little bit while why that's a myth. Next slide, please. So I know a lot of people, we think that putting rocks at the bottom of our containers will help us to fill up that space, and that there's going to be water that's going to be able to get to that bottom. You don't want to do that. It's not for drainage at all. So the research on this is that the water dynamics, it's going to resist penetrating like the different textured soils. So the coarse material that's going to be at the bottom of the pot it's going to cause the water to remain at like a higher level, which means that the water is going to touch the roots of your plant for a longer period of time, and it's gonna rot your roots. So don't put any gravel into your potted plants or at the bottom of your containers, okay? Because you're gonna erase that saturation zone, and you don't need that saturation zone to hurt your plants. Next slide, please. So your minimum container depth, you can always kind of go back to that common crop chart in the front and do a little bit of research about how much space you really need for your roots. So your greens, they only need about 4 inches deep and then 4 inches between plants. And then your beans and your beans and peas, you want to do 6 inches to 2 inches deep. Beans and peas really do well in like your 5-gallon containers and in potted plants, just because you can move them around. They grow straight upwards, and you can use trellises to be able to make sure that they're growing right. And then like for anything else, you can do 8 inches deep. So anything that's got a longer root or that needs that room to have a root vegetable. So your carrots, your garlic, your parsley, those need more root space. You see right here, spinach needs 4 inches between plants and about 8 inches deep. Spinach does have a longer root. You're going to notice that once you do your spinaches, those roots do get to about a foot deep sometimes. And they do last throughout the winter. If you leave them to winter, they'll come out in the springtime. But just take note of your container depths and what you need to grow here in this section. And all of this is just container gardening. Okay, next slide. Now we want to know whether we want to do straight seeding or if we want to do transplants. Does anybody remember the best growing time to start? We talked about this in our first lesson. What's the best time to start growing within our region? May.
I think it was mid-May.
Yeah, it's going to be between mid-May to the beginning of June. That would be our best time to do our growing. Anything before that, you might catch that last frost and you might have to work a little harder to cover your plants. But yeah, between May and June. Next slide. So before you're planting your garden, you want to decide which crops to directly seed into the soil and which crops to transplant into a garden as plant starts. So seeds can be less expensive than starts. If you go to Walmart, you're going to notice that your tomato starts can go anywhere between $2 to $5 each. So direct seeding on your own and starting them on your own and creating your own seedlings is going to save you a lot of money. And this course is all about saving money. And then seeds is also going to give you a better choice of plant varieties because most stores have space for only a few varieties of plant starts. And locations where they come from are kind of hard to get by sometimes, especially closer to the reservation and then further into the reservation. So seeding will probably be your most go-to way of starting your garden. Next slide, please. And then transplanting has its advantages. So a lot of your favorite summer crops, your tomatoes, your chilies, your pumpkins, your squash, they really need a longer growing season than we have here in northern Arizona, right? Because we only have one growing period. Some locations within Arizona, they start their growing periods early on, like maybe February, like down south. And they have 3 growing periods. We only really have like a good 3.5 months or so before we catch that next frost. So we only have 1 growing period, okay? So you want to plant your starts for those crops that are going to be longer. This is when you need to start paying attention and doing your research on your plants, okay? Well, when you start to transplant them into your garden, you have to give them plenty of time to produce a crop before the first frost kills them, okay? And weeds can crowd out really young plants, but transplants are really big enough to get a good head start on your weeds, okay? Any questions on transplants right now? So starting, do you guys understand what starting early means? What time do you think we should start our starts inside the house? Do you guys have a good idea?
I would guess sometime in April.
You could start a little bit earlier. You could actually start in March, your starts, depending on what varieties you want to do. So I would like to start my tomatoes at the end of February, just because this year my tomatoes are just now starting to come out in the hoop house out here at the garden. And it's gotten too cold too fast. So I think I'm gonna start a little bit earlier so that they're fruiting for a longer period of time throughout the summer. So for me personally, I would start in February for my tomatoes and my chilies. My chilies never even got a chance to fruit because I started them at the beginning of April. So I would probably start a little bit earlier in February. Okay, so any other questions on transplant? Comments? Okay, next slide, please. So growing your own starts is really easy to do. You just have to keep them warm. You remember that you're going to be the caretakers. You're going to have to baby these brand new plants. You're going to be the one to take care and make sure that they're growing really well. They're just babies. They're very, very small, and they're just kind of cute when they start coming out, but you'd be the one to make sure that they're kept warm all the time. You are going to have to give them some time every day to keep an eye on them, make sure that their roots are not rotting as they're really young. And then also just make sure that when you're starting your starts, that they have enough room in their containers to grow for like a month or two in advance. Okay, next slide. So over on page 59 of your manual, on page 59 on your manual, that you're going to see this chart right here. It's just choosing seeds or transplants. And in this chart, you're going to see your direct seeding recommendation. So your direct seedings are definitely going to be things for your large seeds, your corn, your beans, peas, your squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, and melons. Notice that all of these are long season crops. So these are crops that you're going to want to get directly into the ground as soon as possible, because they do have longer growing periods. So definitely these are the seeds that you're going to be wanting to put into the ground by mid-May. And then your deep tap roots, your radishes, beets, turnips, carrots, parsnips. The radishes will fruit within 30 days. A lot of the different radishes are. So you want to make sure that you're directly seeding those ones, because you can't really move around vegetables that are in the ground. They need to stay where they grow. And then other things that you want to make sure that goes directly into the ground, your garlic, leaf lettuces, arugulas. And then transplanting, definitely for this region, tomatoes, your peppers, bell peppers, your eggplants, and your basils. Definitely those are long season crops that you need to be very aware of. I know that tomatoes they do really well in this climate up here. And I know we like hot peppers a lot. So those would be those two, I would recommend you start them early, maybe right at the end of February. Okay, and then you can direct seed or transplant those other ones there too as well. We here at the fairgrounds, we have a lettuce bed, and this lettuce bed is year round. We just refresh the soil every couple of months. And a lot of those lettuces and the kales and the chard, they'll grow throughout the winter on their own, and they'll be there in the springtime again. So they do really well in the winter and in the cold months. As long as you keep them covered throughout the winter, you'll always be able to have fresh lettuce at home. Next slide. So did you know that you can grow your food stamps? Like, I know a lot of us here on the Navajo Nation, we get food stamps. There's a lot of fruits and there's a lot of vegetables that already have seeds in them, and you can harvest those seeds. Not only that, but you can buy things like garlic that you can seed directly, onions that you can put back in the ground and then have them regrow and create their own seeds. There's a lot of different ways where you can harvest your own seeds off the produce that you buy at the grocery stores. And you can follow this link, the snapgardens.org, to find more resources to be able to do that if you can't afford seeds. All right, next slide, please. All right, direct seeding. Right now we're gonna go into reading our seed packets. Okay, next slide. All right, there's a lot of information on our seed packets. Sometimes there's not enough information on our seed packets, but most of them, this is basically what's on there. And you'll find this photo in your Seed to Supper manual on page 60. Say they're going to list the same basic information most of the time. They're going to want to know, they're going to tell you when to plant it, how deep to plant it, the distance between the plants and the days to harvest. You want to learn how to read your seed packets, and it's just going to help you make really good decisions on when you grow your crops from seed. So the diagram on page 60 is going to show you some of the areas that you need to pay attention to. So first, we're going to go through our general seed type. There's always a general seed type. It's going to be tomatoes. And then right under it, it's going to give you the specific variety type. There's some varieties that are really good, that do well here. Maybe instead of a larger tomato, you want more of the cherry tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes, they make a lot of fruit, and so you can harvest your cherry tomatoes throughout the summer. And then with the larger tomatoes, you would have to wait till the end of the summer. But it's really up to you which varieties that you want to pick. So keep that in mind, okay? And then it's going to show you your days from sowing until harvest. So the day you put your seeds into the ground, how long it's going to take to harvest. This is where your planting calendar in the first lesson is going to help you work it out. So if we're thinking that our last frost is going to be the middle of March or the beginning of March, or in the beginning of May, we'll be planning out a week or a weekend to start getting everything into the ground. And that'll be the day where you're putting it into your planting calendar and into your planting plan. And then it'll give you a year when the seed is going to germinate the best. Usually these seeds that come to the stores, they're harvested from the year before, and those are the seeds that you want to get. But these seeds will last for a long time. Some of them may get old if they're not stored right. So it's very important that sometimes you double check your seeds, make sure there's no moisture in it, make sure that there was no heat involved in it. If you're going to store your seeds and put them away, make sure you're putting them in an airtight jar or something, and then out of the sunlight where it's not going to get too hot. So a nice cool area, like in the back of your pantry somewhere. And then it's going to show you your distance between your mature plants. And this is where we go back to lesson 1 again, and planning out your footprints. And then how much sun the plant needs. Your common crop chart has all of these too on there. So if this information is not on your seed pack, you can refer back to your common crop chart in lesson 1. And then when to start your seeds indoors and outdoors in relation to the average last frost. always in our area in northern Arizona, we want to make sure that we're going to miss that last frost. And then if you want to get technical, we can go into how warm the soil needs to be for seeds to sprout. And usually for seeds to sprout, some of them sprout in colder weather, but a good temperature for seed sprouting is about 60 degrees on the soil. Next slide, please. All right, so you want to try to only buy enough seeds for one planting year. You don't want to keep these seeds on hands for a long time. So even though some seeds can last for several years, if you store them properly, but they germinate best in the year they're stamped on the packet the year before. You can store your leftover seeds in a cool, dark place, in a closet, basement, and put your leftover seed packets in a sealed jar with a drying agent, like a silica packet or some sort. And that'll help you. Next slide, please. All right, so starting your seeds indoors, it's good for annual plants that you want to get a head start on growing, right? We already discussed that. You may want to get your bedding plants started so that they will be closer to bloom, the bloom time by the time it's ready to get warm enough. So bedding plants are kind of like cover crops. Bedding plants are like your flowers and things that will attract your bees and stuff. You want to start planting them in your garden and have them ready by bloom time by the time they get out there, you know. You may want to get a head start on like your annual crops that have your long growing seasons. Definitely tomatoes and peppers. Always remember that one. And then those will definitely have enough time to harvest after you get them into the ground. Plus, using seeds going to allow you to produce like a large quantity of plants at a cheaper price. Next slide. All right, so the process of germination, you're helping along that process as a gardener. So in order to germinate or break out of the protective shell, they need to be really, really moist and really, really warm. Just like a baby, you have to really take care of them. They're just small, they're innocent, and they're on their own. So you as a gardener would be the one that caretakes for them until they fruit at the end. And you do kind of create a bond with your plants as you're going throughout the year. You'll start to notice the way they look. Even almost as you can see almost how your plants feel some days. When you walk out, you'll notice the changes in the way they stand, the way their leaves kind of droop just a little bit. So you'll notice if they're kind of hot or if they need to be watered, or if they're being finicky, you know. So the more you get to know your plants throughout the season, the better. Next slide, please. So you'll find this table on page 61 of your manual. So some crops, they'll germinate in cool weather, just like your weeds. You'll start seeing weeds coming out in the middle of February in between like the snowstorms. So it really just depends on your seedings. But this chart helps to do that if you want to get very technical with it. Some seeds need more warm temperatures. So those are like your corn, your eggplant, and your tomatoes. So with your corn, with your tomatoes, when you're starting them, you might want to think about getting one of your soil temperature thermometers and using that to gauge the temperature. Next slide, please. Okay, so preparing your seed bed. You want to loosen your soil. You want to rake out a nice smooth tabletop for your garden. You can use a digging fork, you can use a shovel, and then you just want to rake the seed bed real nice and smooth to create a nice, loose, even tabletop for your garden bed. And then to make less work for yourself, you want to spread your compost and fertilizer before you loosen the soil. And then you want to mix them in as you work the bed. Okay, so you're not moving the soil more than once, you're mixing it all in at the same time. So your fertilizer and your soil. In our last session, we talked about getting our soil ready, right? We wanted to get everything and fertilized 4 weeks before we start planting and getting everything ready to go, right? This will help us to keep the soil, it'll help the soil get up to where it needs to be so that the nutrients can get into your plants by that time when you're putting it into ground. So you're wanting to get your ground ready by April. By then you should have a good amount of weeds already taking over. And we're going to cut down those weeds. We're going to make sure that it doesn't have enough time to even seed. Then we're going to start putting down our fertilizer, our soil amendments, and working them into the soil 4 weeks before we plant. Okay. Once it's loosened and it's ready to go, come planting time, you'll be able to just rake it over just a little bit and put your seeds right in. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. So as I said, fertilize before you're planting at least 4 weeks. And it really depends, the timing really depends on the type of fertilizer you're using. You want to go by the instructions on your fertilizers, and make sure that you're following that information to the T. And then timing really depends on the type of your fertilizer. So if you're using fertilizer straight from your corral, I remember I told you that the bebechon, the chicken, the rabbit, and the cow were the best ones to use. The bigger animals with the 4 stomachs, they really break down the seeds. They break everything down to where there's nothing left inside of it. Whereas if you were going to use horse manure wouldn't be good because it's only got 1 stomach, which means that it's going to leave a lot of seeds and a lot of straw still in the fertilizer. And we want to make sure that that fertilizer is more than 120 days old. Then all of that fertilizer will break down into a nutrient that you can use, that the plants can be used. But if you're putting it in fresh straight from the corral, you run the risk of burning and ruining your soil for that year. Okay, so over 120 days old. Okay, and make sure that it's been sitting there a while. But you can use your fertilizers right now and let it sit in the ground throughout the winter. And that'll work as well. And then come springtime, you can fertilize again for just a little while. What you're looking for in those is the nitrogen in it, because nitrogen leaches out of your soil at a faster rate than the potassium and the potassium and I always forget those last ones. Nitrate. So yeah, nitrogen. All right, next slide, please. So when you're sowing your seeds, you can choose one of these patterns. Okay, this is for direct in-ground planting. Okay, so most seed packets have directions for planting them in rows. The packet's going to tell you how deep the rows should be, how far apart to plant the seeds, how far apart to space the rows. You want to draw the rows in the soil, like maybe with a finger or like your garden tool, your shovel. Just draw a line. And then sow your large seeds 1 by 1, or sprinkle in the smaller seeds at the top. So just as an assurance for for growing, you always want to sow twice as many seeds as you need, and then you can always thin them out later. Okay, we'll go up. We'll talk about thinning out your plants a little bit later in the class. You want to check the seed packet to see how deep the seed should be, and then you want to cover them with that amount of soil. You don't want to plant them too deep. Okay. Covering the seeds should be your last step, so you can see if you missed any spots. All right. And then row planting works for all crops, but the distance between rows can waste space in a small garden. So row planting works for all crops. Just depending how big of a garden you really need. So be careful. It's all up to you how you want to seed them. If you keep your rows straight, you might want to use like a string for guides in the ground so that you're not stepping on your seeds. And you know where your garden beds are, as you see in the diagram right there. And then just follow the string as you plant. It just helps you to identify them. I know there was this one lady that was talking to us in one of the classes. She went and she planted a vegetable plant, and it was in the ground. It was like a root vegetable, like a turnip or something, and she didn't know the difference between the seedling that was in the ground and weeds, and what she ended up pulling out was the plant. So she left all the weeds there. She grew weeds for a good month or so before she realized that she had already taken out all the plants. So this just kind of helps you. It kind of gives you a guide so that you know which seeds went where if you put a string in there. Next. Okay, so planting depths. This chart, it just kind of gives you a rule of thumb. I know a lot of us harvest our own seeds here, and we'll use seeds from other people's fields and stuff, and so they don't come with instructions sometimes. So this kind of helps with that situation. So how deep to plant the seeds really depends on the crop. So if you don't have your seed packet or information, if there's no directions, you want to sow as deep as 3 to 4 times the longest part of the seed. If the seed is 1/4 of an inch long, sow it 1 inch deep. If the soil is heavy and you can sow your seeds less deeply and cover them with with a little bit of potting soil, that works. If seeds are too deep, they may never germinate because they never get enough warmth, or they just try too hard trying to get out of the ground. But if they're not deep enough, they may wash away or be carried off by birds. So as you can see here in centimeters, the lettuce, the broccoli, the pea. So the rule of thumb here is 3 to 4 times the longest part of the seed. Okay, let me show you. Let me find something. Okay, so imagine my hand sanitizer is a seed, right? So you would plant 3 to 4 times the length of this, the longest way. Okay, so there would be 3 to 4 times this deep. Okay. Any questions so far before we go forward? All right, next slide. Labeling. Okay. Well, what happened with our garden? I left it all up to somebody else to plant. The first year we made it, I was busy doing other things, and he didn't label anything anywhere. So I didn't know where he put the seeds. We had to guess what we were looking at for the longest, and I didn't know what was going on inside the garden, and he didn't even remember which seeds he put in certain beds. So the entire summer we didn't know if we were looking at a weed, if we were looking at a parsley at one point in time. We were freaking out. And then there was one asparagus sitting out there that I mistook for a dill because he said it was dill. And so if you look at the leaves on a dill and on a asparagus, they almost have the same leaf structure. I couldn't smell the dill off of it and I didn't know why. And it turned out that it was an asparagus. So the whole time I was standing there looking at dill when it really was asparagus. So it's very important for you to remember to label your plants, especially if you got specific variety types, okay? If you're growing specific variety types, and let's say you're doing 3 different types of tomatoes and you have them started, make sure you know what you're looking for. Some of these tomatoes, they need trellises, okay? If we don't know what kind of tomato plant it is and you miss the opportunity to put them on a trellis, you could really put your plant in danger of not fruiting, okay? So make sure you do your research on your plant varieties. You can use just about anything to label. You can use plastic forks, the plastic spoons. Right here with this one, they use old popsicle sticks and yogurt containers. They cut that up and they use that in the garden to label their plants.
We have one comment.
Yeah.
Amanda Benali says kids helping can get adventurous.
Oh yeah. One thing about working with kids and gardening is you can really help them to understand the benefits of growing their own food. And they really take a lot of pride in the food that they grow. And because they grow their own food and they get to taste their own food, they get to harvest their own food, somehow it just makes it taste so much better to them. When I bring the produce from my garden to special diabetes events, or I let the kids pull their own vegetables out of the garden, like during the fair, Navajo Nation Fair, we let the kids pull their own carrots out of the carrot bed and let them wash it off and eat it right there. And a lot of the kids will say that what they get off of the vine tastes sweeter and better than what they get at the store, and they will love it forever. But yeah, the kids got to have a lot of fun. And one kid went around pulling out all the onions, and his mom said he didn't like onions, but he was eating onions. So very adventurous indeed. Next slide. So when you're watering your seedlings, you want to be careful. You don't want to dump your water on them, right? You want to mist them or lightly water them often so that the soil is always moist, like a nice wrung out sponge, but not soggy, not too soggy. And then if you're going to be using a hose, use a nozzle with a mist setting on it. Okay, you want to avoid the heavy water like splashing on there and moving your seeds around in the soil. So a nice mist setting to avoid washing the seeds away. You want to hold a nozzle above the soil until the water starts to puddle just a little bit. Let the water soak in, then continue watering and until it puddles again. Do it several times and do it evenly as you're watering. And then when you're doing new seed beds, you want to do them almost every day or every 2 days until the seedlings are well established, okay? Or if it's hot outside, you want to make sure that you're doing it more often. You need to make sure that it's moist and misted lightly. And you don't want to let the soil dry out too much, but just a little bit in between the waterings, okay? Does anybody have questions on that one? All right, mist settings, be careful with your plants. They're just babies, don't hurt them. And water is heavy, so be careful. Next slide, please. Okay, remember earlier we said we wanted to plant our seedlings doubled, right? To make sure that they seed well. So now we're gonna go and we're gonna start talking about thinning. So when you double seed, you're triple seeding, you're making sure that everything is going to come out right. And sometimes they don't. You want to thin them out to the footprint that they need. Right here, this lady is got carrots there. And then the footprint for a carrot is they're not really that big. But if you want really nice big carrots, you want to be able to thin them out in between so that they have the room and the space and they're not competing with each other for water or the nutrients within that area. So like plants, you need to make sure, especially for carrots are like a micro seed, they're very small. You can thin them out as they're growing a little bit at a time. And then in between those thinnings, as they're growing, you can get the miniature carrots and you can have those throughout the summer, and you're continuing to thin so that 1 or 2 carrots can be bigger. You get what I mean? So you're slowly thinning them throughout the summer until you get a full carrot. Any questions on thinning? Okay, next slide. So you want to start beginning the thinning when your first true leaves start to develop. Okay, the true leaves are a plant's mature foliage. They're going to be at the top. They're going to look different from the seed leaves. So when your seed comes out, it's got these really tight, nice, cute little tiny leaves. And then it'll grow from there a stem, and then more leaves will come out the top. When that happens, those are your true leaves, those second set of leaves. Okay, you want to thin out the first ones that are going to be really weak. So the ones that are kind of yellowing, the ones that don't look healthy, you want to pluck those and bring those out first. You want to leave the stronger ones to grow. When you're thinning, you can snip the seedlings at the surface or at the soil, or gently just pull them up by the roots. And then you want to water it well after thinning to keep the remaining plants from drying out. You want to thin them about weekly until each plant has the right footprint. Remember, the footprint you can find on the common crop chart in chapter 1. And then that you want to make sure that growing space is there for that one plant for the rest of the remainder of the year. Or you can let them kind of grow out just a little bit and end up with like little tiny baby carrots and thin them out throughout in between, but every week. Okay. Next slide, please. So some thin seedlings like lettuce, beets, chard, kale, collard greens, spinach, those can be eaten as baby greens. There's a lot of different vegetables out there that you can eat the leaves off of as you're thinning them. Do a little bit of research on this one. This one looks like they were radishes. You see the roots, you see the small baby radishes there. What they did was they pulled them out and they thinned them out. You can actually still eat the radish at the bottom, the root, and then also the leaves. So those you can fry up and put them into like a stir fry of some sort. So you can eat those as baby greens and you can fry them up really well. They come out pretty good. If you know how to season them right, you should be able to get it done. Next slide, please. All right, now we're going to get into transplanting. Anybody have any questions on thinning so far?
A comment from Amanda, even sandwiches.
Yeah, you can make them with sandwiches. You can make a salad out of them even. All right, next slide. All right, choosing healthy transplants. Okay, this is when this is going to be really helpful for you if you want to go to Walmart to buy your seedlings. They're going to be expensive. They're going to be pricey. If you're thinking you want to keep your costs down, make your own starts. So you want to choose the best ones if you're going to be buying more bang for your buck, right? So between the two on the screen, you want to choose the one that's on the right. It's stocky with healthy deep green leaves, and the roots are not twisted around itself. The plant on the left, it's not as much of a good choice because it's kind of spindly, it's long, leggy. And then the leaves are kind of almost like a greenish, yellowish color. And the root system is like really root bound in there. As you can see, they're like growing around each other, and it didn't have enough space to grow that big. So when you buy them like this, you definitely want to go with the short, stocky ones. And then you want to harden them off too as well. So hardening off is just basically taking your seedlings and taking them out and taking them outside throughout the day so that they can acclimate themselves to the outdoor temperatures, and then do that, bring them inside, take them back outside, gradually do it for a few days, increasing the time a little bit at a time before you start planting them in the ground. Like, you wouldn't want to take a brand new baby straight out into the cold, you know. You help them to get used to it before you get them out there, right? What happens is you can put your plants into shock if you just put them out straight into the ground without hardening them off. So make sure that you're taking the time out of your day to introduce them to the world and say hello to the sun, okay? Be careful with them. They're very, very they're very, what's the word there? Sensitive by then. Next slide. So you want to space your plants according to its footprint. This one right here that looks like tomatoes. It's gonna look like it's too far apart, but remember, we're planning for our footprint, where our footprint is gonna be the size of the mature plant by the end of the season. Okay, this is why your specific variety types you need to know your specific variety types. Some of these types of tomatoes, they're short and stocky. Some of them need trellises to grow up and vine on, and some of them get like really big 4-foot bushes. So take note of your variety and what they might look like. It's good to start thinking about that when you're going forward and planning your space. Remember to include that information on your planting calendar and your planting plan in the first lesson. Okay, use those worksheets as much as you can. Next slide. Okay, this happens all the time. You're thinning or you're separating your starts. So nursery transplants, they often come with like more than one plant in a single pot. If you're able to gently separate the roots without breaking them, the way this lady is doing in this photo, you can plant each seedling separately. But if the seedlings are too hard to separate, you want to choose the healthiest looking plant and cut off the rest at the soil level to keep them from competing with each other. Okay, so you're going to pick the strongest one. Next slide. So you want to transplant your starts early in the morning or early in the evening to prevent wilting. You don't want to do it at the hottest time of the day because they will get shocked by the sun. You want to water the starts before you transplant them, and you want to handle them gently. Watering them while they're still in the container helps them to loosen up their roots in that soil just a little bit. And it gives them just that and just enough water to get through this. And it just makes it a little less shocking for them. Okay. You're going to dig a hole that's wider and slightly deeper than the root ball. And then you're going to put the root ball into the hole. And you're going to want the root ball to be level with the soil. This is a good time to put your fertilizer inside the hole at the root bottom. Okay, that works okay. Sometimes a little bit of fish emulsion during this process helps a lot with transplant. It just helps to take a lot of that stress off of them just a little bit. And then you want to set your transplant in the hole, and the bottom leaves are at the top of the planting hole. You want to gently backfill the hole with soil, but don't compress it, okay? and then gently water the plant. And it should start right away. Okay, like as soon as you get in the ground, water it, and then keep it well watered during the first week. The soil is going to settle, so you might want to add more soil to the planting hole after you water. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so tomatoes are different. The transplanting for this one is way different. So tomatoes that need to be transplanted deeper than the root ball. So the root ball, it needs to be up to, you need to plant it up to the first leaves. Okay, so you're gonna want to cut off the bottom set of the leaves and plant the tomatoes so that it's at least 2 or 3 sets of leaves above the soil. Okay, so the new roots will start to form right below the soil. So you're going to be planting tomatoes a little bit deeper than you would think. Okay, and if you don't have the planting space, there's a way that you can let me see. So let me see the straw. So when you're planting a tomato and you don't have the root space, like say here's your tomato, like this, your tomato plant, and your leaves are starting here, right? You're gonna want to, so you're gonna want to plant up to that next set of leaves right there, right? You're gonna plant it deeper, but if you don't have the soil space on the bottom, you can actually turn it up like this so that it's bent just a little bit. Okay, but you should always be trying to put your tomato plants in about a foot or 8 inches or more of soil. Okay. Any questions on tomato transplant so far? Okay, next slide. Oh, we're already done. Okay, so next week we're going to be talking about caring for your garden. And we're going to go over watering. We're going to be talking about protecting your plants, your vertical gardening projects, if that's something that you guys are looking for. And then just improving and protecting your soil health throughout the summer, because some of these plants, and especially your container plants, they do need fertilizers and they do need nutrients throughout. Just remember that you always need to keep your nitrogen in mind and making sure that that's that you're replenishing that so that it's not leaching out too much. And then good things for nitrogen you can find in chapter 2. And that you would go back to put what to put in your compost pile section. It's on page 42, and it talks about your brown layers and your green layers. So your compost pile, the things you really want high in nitrogen, definitely your garden waste, your kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, your grass clippings, and then composted manure. So those would be the ones that you would use to fertilize and give nutrients back into your soil during the summertime. Does anybody have any questions so far? Any comments?
That was very helpful information. Thank you. I can't wait to get started in the spring.
Okay, Noka, she says, I'm a bit scared of doing the thinning. I think I heard it called pinching. I did this for my basil plant and the stem would just like turn brown and get hard like it was dying and the leaves would only grow on the top. Thinning is something that you kind of got to get comfortable with doing, because I was scared of thinning too, like, because they're just cute and you don't want to waste what you seeded, you know, sometimes, and you just want everything to grow, but they really do need that space to be able to make the best fruit ever. Davina says, I guess I've been doing all the no's with watering, a lot of no's recorrected for next planting. Good info. Thanks for all this planting techniques. And Amanda, thank you. Rachel, you're welcome. Michael, go ahead.
So I think it's a gardening question, but I'm not really sure. So I want to plant corn next year, not like a whole lot of corn, just a good amount, because I want to harvest some corn pollen, but I don't know, like, how do I do that?
Okay, your corn, you're definitely going to want to directly seed it into the ground. Depending on your corn variety, do you have a variety in mind?
No.
So let's say you want to do sweet corn. Sweet corn is a soft corn, right? And what we grow around here in the Southwest is a hard corn, like the hard white corn, your hard blue corns, and then those are like your meal corns, right? Your sweet corns, those are the ones that are going to get like your 6 foot, 12 foot stalks, right? If you want a shorter version of that, you would go with like a hard kernel corn, something you can dry. So look at your variety types. What exactly are you looking for in your corn? Do you want to make nishiji out of it? Do you want to, you know, put it away for winter and dry it? You know, are you going to use it for Navajo cake? Are you going to cut it off the cob and put it in the freezer? It really depends on what your seed variety is. And then your location too as well. If you're going to do a sweet corn will take a lot of water. And it probably needs more water than like your hard variety corns that grow here that are like more local and indigenous to our area. So look at your varieties. If you've got a backyard, you definitely don't want 12-foot stalks. That's going to take up a lot of space, but you definitely need about a good 12 to 20 corns to be able to get a good amount of corn pollen off of it. So that would probably be one line of corn. And they pollinate each other. And one thing that's really cool about corn is they can pollinate other types of corn for miles and miles and miles. There's so many different varieties out there to choose from. You just got to do your research on what you want.
Does it matter which variety I pick to harvest the corn pollen?
No, they'll all have corn pollen, but you need more than 12, between 12 and 20 plants to be able to get corn pollen off of it.
Okay. When would the time be for me to go out and collect and like harvest the corn pollen? Is there like a certain time for that?
This is when you have to pay attention to your corn. Okay. When you're looking at the tassels on your corn, it starts to come out. It should be brand new. You'll start to see them coming straight out of the corn itself. At the top, you'll notice that some of the corn pollen kind of just barely hangs off of the tassel at the top. That's when you want to go in and start to take it off. And you want to go in the mornings, every morning, before it starts to get windy, because it dries out really fast and it just blows. So it's good to check your corn every day when it starts getting closer to that time, and you'll notice it start to dry out just a little bit, but there's little tiny pollen packets that sit on it, and it gets kind of thready and it kind of just hangs off, that's when you want to harvest your corn pollen.
Okay, thank you. I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah, pay attention to your plants. That's all you can do. Yeah. I think in our first one, I was telling everybody, don't make sure your garden's close to your house so you can keep an eye on it. It's just like taking care of kids. You don't want them 2 miles, 3 miles down the road playing on their own. You need to be able to constantly check on them and see where they're at and what they're doing.
Hey, Anna, this is Rhonda.
Hey, Rhonda.
Hi, do you need me for anything else or can I go ahead and just log off?
Okay, yeah, we're good.
Okay, just because my grandson's choir concert's tonight, so maybe I can still get there in time.
Okay, cool. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Learned a
Mhm.
lot tonight again. Talk to you later.
We are going to be having some events coming up pretty soon. One of
Okay.
those ones being the St. Mary's holiday food distribution. What they do is they'll bring up trucks from Phoenix and they give out their holiday boxes. And the holiday boxes, they have the turkeys and the pies and everything you need for Thanksgiving and Christmas. But that's coming up here pretty soon. They are looking for volunteers if anybody's looking for something to do or to give back to the community. And I'll give that over to the Navajo Nation Library so that they can post that out on their website. But they're going to be hitting here at the Navajo Nation Fairgrounds. They will be at Chinle Wildcat Den, I believe. Kayenta, Tuba City. There's a few other places that they will be, but I'll have it posted on Navajo Nation Library's website so that if you want to, you can go and volunteer. This would be a good opportunity to kind of see what your food system really looks like here on the Navajo Nation and how really dependent people really are on food boxes and, you know, the current situation. I think that when we're talking about gardening, when we're talking about food systems and food insecurities on the reservation, it's something that's not very well known. We only have 13 grocery stores here, and we're larger than a lot of states that are out on the East Coast. And we only have 13 grocery stores. And a lot of our people, we don't have access to vehicles. You'll notice a lot of grandmas and grandpas hitchhiking over to Bashes and carrying their bags of groceries home. It's those people that they have like the worst food insecurity issues. And it's something that plays out here on the reservation every day. So gardening is a way to kind of create those vegetables and those fruits for people to eat and to consume. And that helps with a lot of your food related diseases too as well. Not only that, I'm always going to say this, it's something that we need in order to revitalize our cultures. What I'm teaching here, you guys here through Seed to Supper, it's something that's very well needed. I know that a lot of us are really struggling with water issues right now. The cost of water has gone up. It's not raining enough, and this year it rained a lot. So when we're talking about these issues and we're talking about gardening, you have to really take into account your natural world outside of your house, and what the plants and animals are really dealing with. When you're taking yourself back into the garden and you're really putting yourself into that garden, you start to understand the balance you really need to be able to make something like this happen so that you can feed your family, and how necessary it really is. I think that when we're talking about food systems here on the reservation, and President Ned and his wife have been great people in talking about gardening and getting it revitalized. there's so much that we can do with this information. We just need to bring it back. Today, my kids came into the office. They come in here because it gets dark here. I don't want to be by myself in the office by myself. So I bring my kids into the office while I'm teaching this class. And I sent my son out to the garden, and he picked out kale and he picked out onions. And there was a packet of noodles in the back of the kitchen. And he cut up the kale, he cut up the noodles, and he cut up the kale and the onions, and he put it in the noodles, and it came out really, really good. So he was able to put together a simple, more healthier version of noodles by just adding the kale and the onions. And it created a little bit more of a healthy choice for him. Not only that, but that's gonna make him feel fuller, longer, and it's really cheap to do. What I'm striving to do is making sure that people understand that they have this opportunity to grow for something for themselves so that they can increase their nutrition intake. And that increase in nutrition intake and the physical activity it takes to be able to garden is a really healthy lifestyle for them and themselves. It really helps to get you out of your daily. It creates that sense of harmony within yourself and within your home and within your family. If you can get your family to help you to garden, and you can really use it as a place to learn science and culture and integrate that into your family, you won't ever see your children go hungry ever. If your child really knows how to cook for themselves, if your child knows how to grow for themselves, if they ever come into a hard time, that's where these kids are going to accelerate from. So it's really up to you how you want to implement that and those teachings into your family and into your culture at home. Okay, Clara had a question. My corns were small and the leaves got purple with a strip, maybe a lack of phosphorus. When my leaves got purple with a strip, I was lacking nitrogen. Questions, comments, anybody? Gloria, is there a report on the amount of food consumption on Navajo? Not anything recently. Not anything recently. And as for your lemon peels, May compost, I found out you can do lemon peels and orange peels and acidic peels. You just got to leave them there for longer, for like over a year, and you can create compost out of that. And then for Clara, you had questions about the Russian thistle and the amaranth, and you needed to know what you needed to do to get rid of it. The answer to that question is making sure that they don't get old enough to seed, and make sure that you're burning those weeds before they start to seed out for the rest of your garden. I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this out. Those of you guys that are joining us on Facebook Live, joining us, if you have any questions, go ahead and email me. My email address is anarita.b@arizona.edu. I hope you guys all have a great weekend. Those of you that came back for your third class, I'll go ahead and have your books ready to go by Monday next week at the Navajo Nation Library. Make sure you talk to Alma, and Alma will have a list for you guys if you guys want the hard copy. And this is the hard copy. It's really pretty. It's got a wire bound on it. So those of you guys that are joining us for the first time today, if you join us for our last 3 classes, you can qualify to get the hard copy of this book, and it's got everything in there. If not, you've got the link for the digital copy, and you can make prints of that one on your own. Okay. Hakushi, go now and have a good night. Sleep well, everybody. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for a wonderful class.
You're welcome,
Miss
Malcolm.
Beyonce.
I hope to see you guys next
Thank
week.
you. Have a good evening, everyone.